been a while that Anna invited me to Social Now, and I'm really, really happy to be here. I met Anna in the conference you just described. It was one of the Enterprise 2.0, the first Enterprise 2.0 conference I attended in the early years of this decade. And I remember seeing Anna. Anna was one of the first influences I identified, and who influenced me. And I remember thinking, wow, she knows a lot, and she's not even Anglo-Saxon, and she's a woman. And I liked her a lot. And Anna invited me to Social Now, and at that time I said, no, I can't. The company I was working for back in the days was paying for me one conference a year, and that came after hard negotiation. So one conference a year, and other conferences I paid with my own money. Choice about how I should develop myself, but I couldn't pay for all conferences, so I made choices. And then I left to the US 4 years with my family, and I focused on conferences in the US. And then I came back to Europe last summer. And Anna, with her persistence, said to me, why don't you come to Social Now? And I thought, yes, okay, now's the time. I'll be delighted. And the theme is super interesting, digital leadership. And then I started to think about what I would say. And that's where I screwed up completely. Because so many things happened in my life. It got me so busy, and I read so many books. Well, to be honest, I should say I started so many books that got me thinking and expanded my thoughts and challenged my previous thoughts. And I felt like, oh my God, I need to speak about digital leadership, democracy, freedom, respect, dignity, resentment, like zillions and zillions of themes started to fill my brain. And it became so big. I took loads of notes and notes again, and worked on the plane, in the train, and it was a mess. And so I'm only half happy with this deck that I'm going to show you, which I finished this morning after breakfast. I'm only half happy because I can't even reach conclusions myself on those topics. So I hope you will excuse me and consider this as a conversation starter. Okay? So let's go. So life is great for some people. Feeling good. You know who they are. Le Pen, Salvini. Life is awesome. Yeah, there's something terribly wrong with political leadership those days, right? Well, too bad it's not limited to politics. This is John Strumpf, a former CEO of Wells Fargo, the bank. You can find quotes of John Strumpf on the internet, leadership quotes. One of them says, everything we do is built on trust. And this guy was grilled by Congress a few years ago for having covered, or maybe even organized, a massive fraud in which millions of accounts, phony accounts, were created by the bank in order to boost performance indicators that in turn boosted the value of the stock price. And this man made $200 million out of it, right? But he accused the employees for being responsible, for being bad employees, unethical employees, and that led to the layoff of 5,300 people. Carlos Ghosn is awaiting trial in Japan, so we cannot draw any conclusion. Apparently, some say that he would have taken company money for his own benefit. I personally find it very surprising because his salary was $17 million a year. Why would you need more money? I don't know. So, no conclusion. And here also you can find some great leadership quotes of Carlos Ghosn on the internet. One of it says, I like it very much, says, I think the best training a top manager can be engaged in is management by example. Yeah. And I'm sure Bob Iger, Disney's CEO, and a remarkable one by all accounts, I'm sure he has also lots of leadership wisdom to share. His compensation last year was $65 million for 1 year, one person, 1 year. Okay. I don't know if you've read Abigail Disney's Twitter thread on about this back in April. If not, I would really encourage you to go and see it. She is the grandniece of Walt Disney, and she calls this compensation insane. And she says, she does not criticize the man at all. She says the system, which leads a compensation of $65 million to be paid to a single man, while employees live on a $15 per hour wage, which is not even a livable wage in many places. And when employees survive on food stamps, this is insane. This cannot continue. Okay? And of course, the Disney PR machine started to build arguments to respond. And I remember one of them was to say, oh, but we're paying for education for some of our employees so that they can get degrees. And Abigail Disney responded like, man, in which world are you living? Do you think your employees who work like 10 hours a day, who have a family to care for, who have transportation, do you think they have the time to study? Do you think they have the brain space to study? Do you think education and education alone should be the key to a decent life? But my discomfort with leadership these days is not just tied to fraud, lies, or insane money. It's also tied to leaders leading people into wrong directions. And this is, you've recognized Jeff Dorsey, Twitter's CEO at TED 2019 in Vancouver. And here he was questioned about Twitter's, the criticisms against Twitter for not handling well enough harassment and manipulation and violence. And he said, oh, we've made some wrong choices in the beginning of Twitter. And if it was to be done again, I wouldn't create a like function. I wouldn't create a like button because this creates unhealthy conversations. It's not a driver for healthy conversations. And so if I would do it again, I would not invent that thing. Yeah, but now we have it. It's in the DNA of Twitter. And now Trump has 60 million followers on Twitter, and he sits in the White House. I will have to live with that. But I'm not concerned with celebrity leaders alone. And I took this ridiculous stock photo of a board because I don't want to pinpoint one specific company or another, but I think that ordinary corporate leadership is also very capable of causing considerable damages. Because there are consequences, there are real life consequences on people of dysfunctional leadership. I spoke about Jeff Dorsey earlier. This French company, it's a moderation company called Nedino, they moderate comments online. And 2 years ago, they started a yearly hate panorama. They pick 15,000 comments randomly out of 15 million, okay, on 25 Facebook pages of the main French media. And they analyze, they cluster them, they analyze whether the comments are hateful or not. And in their latest edition, they found out that 1 out of 7 is hateful. Okay, 1 out of 7 is aggressive or hateful. Where in the world do you see 1 interaction out of 7 between human beings being aggressive or hateful? Conspiracy theories such as anti-vaccine flourish. They're fueled by a rejection of expertise, and they're boosted by digital. And they have led to the very concrete resurgence of a disease like measles, which could be avoided by vaccination super easily, right? And this has led to very concrete stress, illness, sometimes sequela, like long-lasting diseases, brain diseases for kids, immense stress for families. And this is a kind of real-life consequence. You have this charismatic leadership, which is, charismatic and corrupt and megalomaniac leadership, like Chavez in Venezuela. Chavez was elected 4 times. I mean, he was loved, right? He was followed. He had huge followership. And he led this country to ruin. This was the richest country in Latin America. It was a very stable democracy. And it is now completely chaos. And to this date, almost 3 million people have fled hunger, poverty, violence, crime, and so forth. In the workspace, you might say, yeah, okay, it's not comparable, okay? Nothing like war or hunger. But in the workspace, the situation is not great either. People are running around, they're super busy, but disengagement is very high. You see that when trying to achieve something with your colleagues, if you're inside a big organization, or with your clients, if you're a consultant. And I show a picture of this book by Jeffrey Pfeffer, which I thought was very, very interesting. About a year ago, so he studied the impact of organizational culture and structure and workplace ideology, I would say, on individual and organizational health. And he collected loads and loads and loads of employee health and wellness research, put them together, analyzed, it was like big data analysis, and he identified out of that 10 workplace exposures, what he calls workplace exposures, such as being laid off, or being having irregular work shift, or that kind of things, working, not having health insurance, etc. And out of that, through this meta-analysis, he identified that his focus is America. American workplace is responsible for 120,000 excess deaths per year. The workplace is killing people. And in my country, in France, France Telecom, the former name of Orange, has become a symbol of unethical, unhuman workplace. It used to be a public company, an administration, and it was privatized in 2004. And that led to major restructuration, and people had to be let go of. And the company, the then president and his team, organized a deliberate policy of unsettling employees so that they leave. Okay, so it was a policy where, for example, you move people every 3 months, or you don't give them any clarity about their work future, their work evolution. And indeed, some people went away. I mean, they left the company, but some people left for good, unfortunately. 35 people took their own lives in 2 years. Many of them on the workplace, like in front of their colleagues, jumped out of the window. And this cartoon is, see, you can, I don't know if you can understand it, the guy goes to the HR office and the HR guy says this: make yourself comfortable and let's talk about your professional future. Yeah, it's kind of, oh, and by the way, the president at that time was asked about the CEO of the company was asked about what was happening, and he said, oh, it's just a suicide fad. Yeah. So less tragic, but closer to home. This is a picture that was taken upon my farewell party early 2015 when I left to the US with colleagues of mine, really good friends, strong women, change agents. I mean, these ladies, one of them helped me create the Women's Network. Another one joined, became super involved. Another one was the driving force behind an innovation movement. The other one was involved in sustainability movement. 4 years later, I mean now, one of them left on a sick leave, and she's attacking the company for harassment. Another one left on a long sick leave, and she came back. I haven't seen her again, but I've heard she's like a zombie. Another one left the company for nothing, just with no project. She just needed to leave the company, so she left. And another one left the company to a sister company that was divested and that was transferred to another country, so she managed to find her way back in the company in order not to be jobless. Okay, so these are very, very concrete cases, and these ladies and others, they make me think of the little frog on this picture. Either they were bitten or they jumped before being bitten. And the amazing thing is that just 3 days ago, I had a reunion dinner, Monday. I had a reunion dinner with a few friends of mine from my former company. And they were telling me how things go, things are, the nonsense, and then the little humiliations, and that all the things that they're going through that I had forgotten a little bit. And that came back with full force now that the ambition for change at leadership, for culture change at leadership level has gone. And one of their friends had this expression, and it was like, wow, in my brain, because I had already picked this picture for this presentation, and she didn't see it. She said to me, the system has very powerful jaws. Okay? Jaws, mâchoire. So I don't think I need to make a longer demonstration of my viewpoint. I think leadership is broken. And I think that disengagement and populism are two faces of the same problem. They're actually very related. And for the sake of simplicity, I will speak about those three concepts interchangeably. Although I know they are different, they're slightly different, there are nuances. Some would say they're completely different. But to me, I will simplify them in the sense that power, authority, and leadership enable some people to influence other people. Okay, so let's, for the sake of simplicity, I will use that. But let's remember that these attributes are handled by humans with all their qualities and flaws. They are not inherently good or bad, right? Instead, they might be what reveal really who we are. And Abraham Lincoln had this quote, which I will make a little bit more inclusive. Nearly all people can stand adversity, but if you want to test a person's character, give them power. I find it quite good. I heard it recently there was a podcast hosted by Holger Nauheimer on power. It was really interesting. And one thing that is important also to remember is that power, leadership, authority, all these are relational attributes. They don't exist in a vacuum. Okay, so what power, authority, and leadership say is not just about the person who holds them. It's also about us. What do they say about our obedience, our indifference, our comfort? You know, what do we accept, or what do we have to accept? What are the material conditions which make us go with the flow? Okay. So when I think about power, I think about their power. I think about our power as leaders. How are our actions interpreted, seen? What impact do we have? And I also think about our relationship to power. And why is that important? Why is it important to focus on leadership and try to analyze where problems are and possible solutions are? I think John Husband introduced me a few years ago to Michel Cartier's thoughts. Michel Cartier is a thinker, Canadian thinker, very productive one, who analyzed society and the future and loads and loads of interesting things. And he says that since 2000, our societies have been cooking 5 simultaneous crises: economy, energy, ecology, geopolitics, and society. And when I read that, I thought, what is there a common denominator? Is there a crossroads between all that? And I think, well, maybe yes. Maybe that's the crisis of leadership. Maybe here, the common point between all that is a wrong use of power, or to say it quickly. Okay. I also think there's a huge conflict going on right now in our societies, but also in our workplaces, between the democratic aspiration of society, the democratization trend that has been growing for the last centuries, I would say, and the reality of a locked power, locked in society by interest groups or by an elite, and people reject this notion of representation, which is core to democracy. They want their individual needs to be satisfied. You see the yellow jacket movement in France doesn't say anything else. And yet, in our societies, in our Western democracies, we expect equality. But in our workplace, we experience inequality. Okay? And the question, I mean, there are very, very important questions that I'm not sure have answers to this date. Can there be a collective organization without coercion, without force? Can we get something organized without forcing people a bit? I would love to, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Can there be power without submission? I remember that's one of the things that really bugged me in my previous life. I mean, I'm okay with hierarchy. I'm not okay with submission. But is there another way? Can we teach leaders to be leaders without making others feel like slaves? And here I would have loved to think and speak about equality in the workplace. I have no time, so I'll may do that later, another time through blog or whatever. I would have loved to speak about freedom in the hierarchy. I have no time, so I will just mention dignity. I think dignity is surprisingly so often forgotten. I mean, it's so simple, isn't it? I took this picture from, there were demonstrators from at a big, there was a big strike in the 70s at GM. I found this picture in an article that I would quote later. But the strive for dignity is a hugely powerful force that is shaping today's politics. And if you read the book by Francis Fukuyama called Identity, he speaks about the politic of resentment and the politics of dignity. And dignity as being the master concept behind everything that is happening in the world right now. And it's interesting to note in this book how dignity has evolved from a concept that was reserved for a few people deserved dignity, to a concept where everyone now wants to be recognized as a fully respectable human being. Okay. Another concept beside dignity, which I think is absolutely key in this reflection of leadership, is agency, human agency. I was reading a book, this one I finished it because it was so amazing, about humane work. What is humane work? Okay. And I could have quoted like dozens of super interesting parts of the book, but I chose just this one. One of those authors says, an organization of labor that is fully human recognizes the irreducibility. We cannot simplify, we cannot get away with it. It has to stay, of a gap between the prescribed organization of work and the actual organization of work. And in between, there's a space. And in this space, we create, this space is actually the space for negotiation, for a collective discussion around what is it we want to do, how do we want to do. We create rules, whatever this collective needs to go forward. And that's exactly what happened with quality in my previous role. Quality has all sorts of, industrial quality has all sorts of rules, but when you believe that men and women on the shop floor just need to follow the rules and everything will be okay, then you dehumanize people and you actually decrease quality as an output. It doesn't serve at all because there's no, this space is shrinked and disappears. And because of that, you don't have this negotiation and collective definition of a future, and you don't have this creation of mutual aid and solidarity. You don't have bonding between people. You don't have a collective anymore. So some people have thought about how to evolve that. They have thought about ways, designs, whereby the collective could have more space. We could make more space to human agency and therefore dignity. And this system, which has been thought of for a long time now by John Husband, and who resonates so much with all of us, I think is really the way to go, and not only in the workplace, in our societies as well. And on a practical in practice, I mean, I've been using the dual organization model described by John Cotter in my previous role and also currently today at a client, where you have the hierarchy, which is complemented by a network, and the network is completely integrated. It's really closely related to the hierarchy. However, back to this podcast I listened to the other day, it was really interesting. The lady said, let's not believe that because power is distributed, it is better. Let's not forget that there might be, and we see that in with social networks, the way the network is designed conveys power messages, if you wish. Who designed the network? You know, that person has power. And also, where does power go when power relationships become less obvious? When you have no more titles, how does power, authority disappear? No, it does not. It's probably like energy. It remains constant. It's just distributed differently. And how do we avoid clique effect, for example, or unsaid power relations, or unclear, etc. But back to the original question. Leadership is broken. Can digital help? Is it worthwhile spending time thinking about digital leadership? Is it worthwhile here in our work? Is it worthwhile for society to try to bring more leaders onto digital and to focus on and spend lots of time on the human side of transformation, if leaders come to this world with all their flaws, their human flaws, I mean, does it make anything better, right? And I would say first answer would be, first consideration would be to say, well, no, it does not make things better at all. It just makes things worse, right? You see how Amazon is so how Amazon, but also many others, and this is almost a caricature of enslavement and dehumanization, but at a lower touch, all our workplaces are doing that to their workers, right? And people, and here there was a super interesting article a while ago about General Motors, saying its decline truly began with its quest to turn people into machines. And it was a very, very interesting study explaining how their mistrust of workers actually prevented them from making great cars. But the risk of digital is not just about turning people into robots. It's also about biases, maintaining or reinforcing biases, and we don't. And it's funny because we might feel, oh well, digital is just data, so it's rational and logical, and it's just there's no feelings or no biases behind that, but they're just a result of our own biases. This article in The Guardian about how female voices on, like voice systems like Alexa and so on, female voices are well accepted by consumers, or maybe preferred by designers. I don't know, it's a chicken and egg thing. But female voices are accepted for aid or support systems. But male voices are preferred for command systems. Consumers, or maybe designers of the system, cannot bear the fact to be commanded by a woman. And it's crazy. I mean, it's why would it be so? But anyway, uh, there's also the risk of creating even more antagonism in society, as we know, as we see that the yellow jackets have been fueled by Facebook, Brexit as well. You have those crazy 4chan's forums. And of course, digital is a great booster for the bad guys. Unfortunately, it does not help the good guys only, but the others, they also benefit from digital, from the power of connection, from all that things. Okay. However, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that digital can be a wonderful, amazing, super powerful force for good. And I personally wouldn't have been able to trigger the change communities that I did and that I still do now without digital, without social networks, without apps, without cloud, without all these things. It just wouldn't be possible. And I think these tools enable um, a, enable a collective of human to form powerfully, quickly, to have people recognize themselves as fully humans instead of just colleagues, to organize themselves as activists. And I think this is the way we need to go. I explained in an article a while ago what I think is the three major benefits that I think social network bring to leaders and leadership. I think it makes information flow better. You don't have to go through all these protections and layers which surround leaders. It is social networks enable better relationships because you create this relational engagement, which is not dependent on power roles anymore, or less so. And you create a new identity, which triggers better odds of success through change. And these information, relationship, and identity have been described by Myron Rogers. I often quote him because I absolutely love his thoughts. Myron Rogers says that information, relationship, and identity are the deep level of change where change actually happens in organizations. At the opposite of the superficial level where organizations often address change, which is the level of policy, structures, and organization and procedures. Okay, so to me, digital is a transformer, is a game changer because it changes the nature of our interactions. It's not just an engine that speeds up things or that makes things easier. It is transformational, and anyone who has joined online communities has understood that. I think has been transformed by them. So how do we bring the others, those who still do not believe in that? And why do I insist on social media in particular? It is because of the diversity imperative. In our society, in our globalized world, where climate change or wars make millions of people change countries, in our world where more and more like people of different cultures get to marry together, and the population is getting more numerous and more mixed on Earth, and companies have started to understand the imperative of diversity to foster innovation and creativity and relevance in their companies. So I think diversity is becoming an imperative. And at the same time, Fritjof Capra, whom I also feel very inspired by, Fritjof Capra, he's a system thinker, has studied living systems a lot. He says He has this thought about diversity, which I find really interesting. He says, diversity is a strategic advantage of our community if and only if there is a vibrant network of relationships, if there's a free flow of information through all the links of the network, then diversity is a tremendous strategic advantage. But he adds, however, if there is fragmentation, if there are subgroups in the network or individuals who are not really part of the network, then diversity can generate prejudice, it can generate friction, it can generate violence. So I will end up with a few questions, and that will be the end of my presentation. How can digital, and I think these should be questions we ask ourselves every time we get involved into digitization projects or support to anything that is in relation to digital. So how can digital improve the exercise of power and authority? How can it create better informed citizens or employees? Not more informed, better informed. How can it lead to better decisions for more people, not just for a few? How can it support more human agency, not less? How can it make people feel recognized and respected? And how can it unite rather than divide? I don't have answers to all of those, but I'm convinced of a few things. First, the answer will not lie in digital alone. We will have to deal with the messy humans we all are, and we will have to keep, maintain, foster those real-life interactions that we're having. Second, I speak about we as digital literates, as people who are involved in this work of change. We have a big role to play, and therefore we have to be even more aware of our own power, our own leadership, our own impact. And third, I think our work is profoundly political. Thank you.